Hello, my name is Shay Lankin, and I'm doing this PowerPoint on mortality as a motivation for evil behavior. So this is my hook slide. It's a quote from Hannibal, which is a really great show. It follows Will Graham, who is an FBI investigator trying to catch Hannibal Lecter, the famous cannibal. So in this scene, they are going over a murder scene where the murderer cut the victim's back skin off and tied them up to resemble wings. As gruesome as that is, they're trying to figure out why someone would do this, and Will Graham said that they weren't praying to him, they were praying for him. He's afraid. And Beverly Katz, another investigator, said, "What is somebody who could do something like this afraid of?" And Will Graham says he's afraid of dying in his sleep. He's making angels to watch over him. So this is one example in pop culture where the idea of death can be used as a motivator for evil or evil behavior. So this is the link to the required article, and pretty much just the article that I'm discussing throughout this PowerPoint. It talks about previous terror management research, the terror management theory, mortality salience, and I'm only going to go over study 1, but in that experiment they conduct 2 different tests to explore how mortality salience affects aggression in people. So for the discussion questions, I wrote, knowing this, basically everything that I'm going to say, can mortality salience serve as a catalyst in the manifestation of evil? And can the fear of death or lack thereof, which I will talk about later, be any kind of pretext for evil? This slide talks about the hypothesis and the terms that are going to be used in the paper that you need to know. The hypothesis for this study is mortality salience motivates aggression and derogation against those who threaten one's worldview. So starting off, mortality salience is a psychological state where a person is consciously aware of his or her own death, that they know it's inevitable, they know it'll come, and it's used to evaluate terror management theory. A cultural worldview is the greater perception of reality that is held by an individual or a group. It's the product of socialization, it's passed down through generations through stories and rituals, and it encourages a certain way of thinking. It always has, most of the time, worldviews have rules that you have to follow, and if you follow those rules and you behave, you get repaid in salvation after death. This can be one's religious views, political, just spiritual. It's different for everybody. But worldview threats are beliefs that counter one's worldview, that make them obsolete, that go against them. They call your worldview into question. Most often, it's a competing cultural worldview or like atheism. In the religious example, a worldview threat would be a counter-religion, or as I said, anti-religion. So derogation is the perception of someone or something as being of little worth, kind of putting someone down below you, while aggression is the act. It's a hostile and violent behavior, and it's the readiness to attack. It's the actual evil behavior. So this slide goes over the terror management theory, which is a big topic in the paper. It says that all living creatures, animals and humans, share a desire to continue living. This is why we have instincts, fears, and it drives us into the right path to stay alive. But humans are different because we have ego. We have this illusion that makes us feel like we're better than animals, that for some reason we're smarter or that death can't get us. But with that ego comes a super advanced thought system where concerns and fears and overthinking and worry can kind of traumatize people when they think about death because it's uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen, and that scares us. Humans don't like not knowing things. So the actual terror management theory explains how people manage terror regarding one's death. It states that people align themselves with a cultural worldview, religion, politics, spiritualism, in order to protect themselves in death and to give their life a greater meaning, purpose, or importance. Cultural worldviews can be individual or social, as I said before. They can be religious, spiritual, and they always come with a set of rules that one must follow to receive their salvation after death. Though regularly, a person can pick their worldview, unless they're in a cult or a religious family. People usually pick what they believe, um, and this usually aligns with their own beliefs. But the belief that people hold is used as an anxiety buffer for mortality salience and the fear of death, and that's what this study kind of contemplates and goes over. So this slide goes over the procedures, the methods, and just kind of some of the variables for the study. So the dependent variable for the study for aggression, which is what they're studying, is the amount of hot sauce given to another participant. This experiment has two bogus studies that will be explained step by step in later slides, but for just a small synopsis, it's basically politically conservative and liberal participants who are either induced to think about their own death or an exam that is coming up, and then they write an essay. They read someone else's essay, but it's really just a bogus essay, and then they allocate hot sauce to someone else. But there's a bunch of other steps in between to make the process seem a little bit more seamless. There's 38 males and 36 females. They're all psychology students from the University of Arizona, and they were recruited with a political pretext to categorize them as conservative or liberal. So some of the procedures that are important in this are that participants are led that they are taking part in a two-experiment investigation that investigates relationship and personality and attitudes, and there's also one about like tastes and flavors and how that interacts with personality and attitudes. And then each participant in the beginning is given 5 minutes to write a short paragraph about his political views, and this is just used later to kind of trick the participants into thinking that they're later reading a paragraph written by another participant. But the participants are split into two groups, mortality salience group and the exam control group. This is to test whether or not mortality salience has an effect. And then participants are made aware at the end that the hot sauce would remain unknown to the experimenter, so they're not scared of getting reprimanded for giving someone a lot of hot sauce. And the amount of hot sauce is measured by weight that I'll discuss later, and the experimenters use an OHA centigram triple beam balance and measure the hot sauce in styrofoam cups. So this is study 1. It's kind of the precursor to study 2, which is actually being experimented. But this one, they ask the mortality salience group to briefly describe how they feel about death and what they think will happen during death. And they ask the exam control group to think about their next test and what they think will happen as they take the exam. The experimenters give each participant one of two bogus essays, either in conflict with liberal ideas or with conservative ideas. And to manipulate the worldview threat, half of the participants read an essay that threatens their political worldview, while the other half reads an essay that is consistent to their political worldview. Not supportive, but just kind of like, yeah, this. And after reading the essay, all participants are asked to evaluate the essay using an impression formation that is designed by the experimenters to be a non-judgmental form of evaluation regarding the author of the essay that he or she had just read. The questions ask the readers just simple, what do you think about the author? What is the author's college major? What is their gender, their age, what part of the country are they from, and whether or not the author is reserved or outgoing. So this is bogus study 2, where they actually allocate the hot sauce and they're actually testing for the aggression variable. So the participants are told that they're going to be participating in a kind of taste test, and they're going to test dry and spicy foods. So each participant is giving a survey asking them whether or not they like certain flavors, being if they like sweet, sour, creamy, salty, or spicy, from a level of 1 to 21. They are then told that participants will be responsible for allocating the amount of hot sauce that someone else gets because the experimenters need to remain anonymous, and they are also told that the person that they are allocating the hot sauce to does not like spicy food, but this will come up later. So everyone's given a saltine cracker. This is to test for the dry, but it's not really necessary. It's just to trick the participants. And then the participants are given the hot sauce to allocate to someone else. They are told, as I said, that the other participant doesn't like hot sauce, and that they would have to consume all of the hot sauce given. And to prove that the other person doesn't like hot sauce, they give them a bogus survey that they had taken earlier in the study, saying that the participant or the person that they're giving their hot sauce to gave spicy a 3 out of 21. And then afterwards, the participants are giving a self-report survey about how many spoonfuls they gave, and a short closing survey, and then they are fully debriefed about the entire actual experiment. So these are the results of the experiment about the hot sauce. As you can see in the red, that's the amount of hot sauce given in the mortality salient, and as you can see, it's kind of greater than all the other amounts, and that's important because it helps the hypothesis. It gives information to the hypothesis. And in these results, you can see that participants in the exam control show no significant kind of difference in the levels of aggression towards either worldview threatening or worldview consistent views, which is important because obviously the exam control shouldn't really have any sway either way. But the participant self-reports also show the same pattern, which is good. It shows that it's kind of, they know what they're doing and this is correct. And the hostility and hot sauce allocation are significantly correlated in all worldview threatening conditions, which grants more evidence for the use of hot sauce as a dependent variable for aggression in future studies, which is good because it'll help, excuse me, it'll help future experimenters in their future studies. But mortality salience seemingly in this study has an effect on aggression levels and worldview threats, which is good because it supports the hypothesis. So what does it all mean? As I said in the previous slide, the results of study 1 significantly support the hypothesis that mortality salience leads to aggression against worldview threatening others. Others is just the term that the study used, and it's just all things, in my opinion. But the study also explains how the use of hot sauce can be used as a variable for aggression, and that's significant because it could be used in later studies. And this all means that mortality salience increases the level of aggression demonstrated against worldview threats. So knowing this, can mortality salience serve as a catalyst in the manifestation of evil? Considering the results, one can say that mortality salience leads to aggression towards worldview threats. Aggression can certainly lead to the manifestation of evil, and therefore mortality salience may serve as a catalyst for evil, depending on the person and the situation. Can the fear of death, or lack thereof, be any kind of pretext for evil? So the participants that were induced to think of their own deaths showed more aggression towards worldview threats. This is kind of significant because it shows that people that think about their death, maybe that fear or whatever they're feeling makes them feel more aggressive towards people that don't really agree with them. And these results show evidence that the fear of death may premise evil. It may cause evil in some kind of situation. But later on, I'll talk about whether or not that's applicable, or if the lack thereof fear may have any kind of significant impact on this. So these are the limitations. And the first one is that participants only read essays threatening their worldview and kind of in contrast, or just kind of normal. They're not really supportive. But if they had read essays that were supportive of their worldviews, the participants may have been more inclined to give these authors less hot sauce, and they may have kind of given the other ones more hot sauce, and that could have changed up the experiment a little bit. And secondly, as I said before, this is one limitation talking about the lack of fear. It may be possible that mortality stimulus simulated physiological arousal in participants via domination, excitement, or even irritation, but not really aggression or fear or sadness. And this is what motivates the negative behavior towards the worldview threat. As I said, not fear. However, this idea is severely doubtful. It may mean that the lack thereof fear for death makes someone more prone to aggressive behavior. And this is a little cute comic. It says, "I'm not afraid of death," and then death comes and he's like, "Ah, don't scare me like that." I thought it was funny. So this is my closing slide, and for my closing statement, I'm going over everything again and saying that the study that this presentation embodies reviews previous literature and creates its own study based on this literature in order to test whether mortality salience motivates aggression. The results of the experiment concluded that mortality salience does indeed show a significant level of motivation towards aggressive behavior towards worldview threatening others. Thus, these findings can be used as an agreement that mortality salience serves as a motivator or a premise for evil actions or behavior. And finally, I want to leave you with this Latin saying, memento mori. It means remember that you too shall someday die. And I think that's important. And these are just my references. The first one is the study. The second one is a little article I read trying to figure out terror management theory. The third one is the Oxford Dictionary via Google, because I used the Oxford Dictionary to look up my terms. And then this little white box over here is the citations for the picture of death with the guy, because it came with it. So I figured I had to put it there. But thank you, and goodbye.